Dear God, I'm ready for your help in removing from me the defects of character which I now realise are an obstacle to my recovery. Help me to continue being honest with myself and guide me towards spiritual and mental health. It is with much love and gratitude that the group welcomes Mags D to come and share with us. Mags, over to you.
Thank you so much, Purdy and Katie, and everybody else that's doing service in the background. My name is Mags and I'm an alcoholic, and drugs are part of my story. And when I speak, I'll probably tend to lean towards the alcohol thing, but as was read out, it's the illness of addiction that I have. And if there's anybody new who's in this meeting this evening, listen to what you can identify with. I hope I'm going to say something that will make some sense to somebody in this room. All I'm really here to do is, as per the brief, is to share my experience, strength and hope around step 6 and 7. And a lot of it, if you're new, or even if you have been about some time and haven't got a sponsor and haven't started working the steps and haven't had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, will probably feel quite alien and confusing to you. But that's okay, because when you get a sponsor, a big book, and have a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, and a whole new world will open up to you. So I suppose you're listening to this through the ears and the lens from which you're experiencing it at this moment in time. And that's all we have right here, right now. So don't be concerned. If all of this, whatever it is I'm going to say, doesn't make sense to you. I've learned over the period of time of my recovery that the not knowing is the gift. And it might not make much sense when I say that, but had I known what was ahead of me in my recovery, I would have got in the way of it, because I would have been too afraid to be able to understand the depth and weight of what this power greater than myself wanted me to have, and always wants me to have. I want to thank the gang that put this meeting together. As I try to assemble my thoughts into some sort of order, it's very, very rare in recovery that you get a meeting like this that is dedicated to these critical steps of 6 and 7. And I think from my own experience, there are a couple of steps that can sometimes be really misunderstood. And because on page 76, if you've got a big book in front of you, then open it up, have a look at page 76. They're very clever how they wrote this book, the writers, aren't they? How can you forget that that's where the steps 6 and 7 are? You know, it's on page 76. They've always given us these little clues to make it easy for us to find these things. Yet I will try to work out the back end of everything, when in actual fact the clear-cut directions are just set out in such masterly detail, like it says on in the doctor's opinion. So don't mistake it with page 67. That's where you're going to find a whole other load of stuff that you're going to be interested in before you get to this point. But yeah, page 76. There's 2 tiny little paragraphs, and I'm sure you've heard people talk about this before. This is my first time at this meeting. I don't know what has been said by the other speakers. Genuinely, I'm just here to give you my experience of it. 2 tiny little paragraphs that when I first came into the rooms, I thought, oh well, these mustn't be too important. There's only 2 paragraphs out of all of the 164 pages, so they can't be that interesting. And then little Miss Smarty Pants decided to work it all out for herself and counted the number of lines. Well, there's 2 paragraphs, there's 14 lines, and then Miss Smartier Pants decided to count the number of sentences in the paragraphs. And just so that you know, there's only 5 full sentences in step 6, and there's 4 full sentences in step 7. So there's only like 9 sentences in the 164 pages that appear to be relevant. And in the grand scheme of everything, like quantity-wise, within the words of the book, it might seem quite irrelevant. But the reality of it is these 2 steps, each time I have gone through them with my sponsor, I can honestly say from the bottom of my heart, and I'm not just saying it because I'm in this meeting, this is where I have had the deepest, most effective spiritual experience each time I've gone through. Life-changing, deep and effective spiritual experience every time I've gone through these steps. And there's a very dear friend of mine on the screen here, and next time we meet, I will be taking her through step 6 and 7, and I know that the not knowing for her will be the gift, because you just don't know what's ahead of you when you get through these steps. They're just incredibly divinely inspired. But before I go into those actual steps, I think it is important, because we are in the big book, that we give a little bit of context of where we're at, because there's so many of the steps that precede this. But on page 72, into action, I love that chapter 6, into action. You know, when you're with your sponsor and you get to this point and they turn the page from page 71 into 72 and the title is into action, I put my head in my hands and I was like, are you for real? Seriously, into action? What have I been doing up to this point? Because the reality of it is, this is actually where the action starts. All of the stuff leading up to this point is the preparatory steps. You think you've done a lot of hard work up to this point? Well, you have. But this is just the beginning. And that first paragraph on page 72 just gives you the most beautiful summary of where we've been. And I'm just going to read it. So having made our personal inventory in step 4, what should we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude. So that's our step 2. We've been trying to get a new attitude with our Creator. Step 2 in the short form says that we came to believe that this power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. We've also been trying to get a new attitude towards our Creator, step 2. We've also been trying to get a new relationship with our Creator, step 3, where we're making this decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him, and to discover the obstacles in our path. So that's step 4. So in that first little few sentences, they're telling us the summary of where we're at up to this point. Interestingly enough, we have admitted certain defects. There's that first time that you'll hear that word defect. We know that the steps on the short form that are set out on page 59, on page 6, on step 6 and 7 say, in 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And then it goes on into 7 to say, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. There is a story as to why defects isn't mentioned twice. Bill just wanted to have, the writers of the book just wanted to have a different word. So shortcomings and defects is what it is. So we have admitted certain defects. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. And we've done that through the personal inventories that we've done in step 4. We put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. And now these are about to be cast out. Cast out is really important at this stage. We cast these things out by completing steps 5 through 9. But the journey that we've been on up to this point is an interesting one, because on this page 72, we're talking about casting them out. We're talking about getting rid of these defects. On page 27, when we're in the heart of step 1, when we're in the heart of understanding the mental obsession, they talk about, Carl Jung in the paragraph on page 27 talks about casting to one side our emotions. That's step 1. In step 2 on page 48, they describe the fact that we have to cast aside our feelings. That now our emotions, our feelings, and these defects are all about to be cast out. We are no longer living in a world where we're affected by our emotions and our feelings. We have a different way of thinking when we get to this point in our program. This is no longer about our drinking and our using. This is about our thinking. This is where our brain is continuing to be rewired as we continue to turn the pages and show up with our sponsor and follow these clear-cut directions. But of course, this requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves and another human being, the exact nature of our defects. So through your step 5, in this order, you're admitting to God, you're admitting to yourself and another human being the exact nature of these defects. And the nature of something, it's important, I think, to understand this, and I try to bring this alive for sponsees whilst I'm bringing them through the book, but the nature of our defects is the controlling force. So what we've identified in our 4-column inventory and our fear inventory and our second inventory is the controlling force of what has been the determinant factors in our lives for us to behave in the way that we behaved, to demonstrate the conduct that we had at that time, whether that be dishonesty, selfishness, self-centeredness, driven by 100 forms of fear. It doesn't matter which one of those are, but that's what has been our controlling force up to this point. We've used those things. We've lived on our defects of character. And to a large extent, I became those defects of character. I didn't know how to live without my selfishness, my dishonesty, without having resentments, and without living in a world of fear. My sponsor explained it so beautifully to me as we were going through these steps, because I truly didn't understand when I read them off the scrolls on the wall in the short form. That's a really simple way of putting it, and I hope I can do this some justice. But a defect for me is a lack of something. So if I had a car and if it had a problem, you get a little sign on the dashboard, don't you? The little light comes on the dashboard to tell you that there's a defect in the car, that there's something wrong with the engine, that there's something wrong with the tires. So if I had a car, I would bring it to the dealership or to the mechanic. They'd hook it up to a computer. They'd put some power in it. They'd identify what the defect was, and they'd add something into it to remove the defect. So they'd add more oil, they'd add water, they'd add more pressure, something. I'm not a mechanic, so I don't know. But basically, they have to add something in to remove the defect. And that's exactly what happens with me as I'm going through my step 6 and 7. My defect is the lack of power. We know from page 45 that lack of power is my dilemma. And if you're wondering where you find that power, well, that's exactly the purpose of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, for you to be able to find that power. By this point in the steps, you already know where that power can be found, and that is deep down within every single one of us. By this point, you may already know where you feel that presence, where you hear that little quiet voice within when you pause, when you're agitated. So in my step 6 and 7, I have these defects. I've gone through my 5th step. I put my finger on the weak items in stock, 100% all of those weak items that I need to get rid of. And those two short little paragraphs are so straightforward. Like, there are other books available, there are other things that we can study and read to add to this. But for me, everything I needed for 6 and 7, and each time I've done the steps, has been in these two little paragraphs. You know, if I can answer to our satisfaction, i.e. the people that wrote the book, that if we've done everything up to this point as they have set out in the clear-cut directions, then we're ready to look at step 6 and 7. We've already done that review of the bottom paragraph on page 75. Are the stones properly in place? We've carefully reviewed the first 5 proposals. Is the cornerstone properly in place? Is the keystone properly in place? I'm not going to go into all of the detail of that this evening because I just don't have the bandwidth right now to do that. But your sponsor will explain all of that to you, and I'm sure there's many that have spoken before me and gone into better detail than I can. But essentially, they're emphasizing this willingness being indispensable in this step 6 experience. We know from the spiritual experience at the back of the book on page 567 that willingness, honesty, open-mindedness are completely and utterly indispensable. They are the essential requirements, and they're emphasizing the willingness here still is indispensable. And are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted that are objectionable? Like, that word now is so important. Like, are you ready now in step 6? Not yesterday, not tomorrow. Are you now ready to let God remove all the things which you have admitted? Admit means to let in the idea that something, have you let in the idea that the things that you've identified in your inventories actually are objectionable? Can he now take all of them? Every one. And it comes with a little caveat here. If we still cling to something, we will not let go. We ask simply for God to help us to be willing. When I did my inventories, particularly the first time, I only scratched the surface of what I was able to see. There were things in my life that I still thought I had the power to control. The alcohol and the drug problem had been removed at this point. Like, I mean, totally and utterly removed. And that will continue for the rest of my life as long as I keep doing what I should be supposed to do with my daily reprieve. But there was a couple of things in what I call the third dimension of existence that I was clinging on to. You don't need to know what those things were. But in clinging on to these things, these external, worldly things of this third dimensional world that I thought were important, I was clinging onto them for dear life because I still thought I had control. I still thought I had the power to sort these things out for myself. I was clinging on for dear life, knowing, having been through my step 4 and admitted in my step 5 that these things were truly and utterly objectionable. They were not adding to my life, they were continuing to take away from my life. And it was all to do with my thinking, what I thought I knew. And that's why, Purdy, when you read out that set aside prayer at the beginning of the meeting, had you not read that out, I would have said it myself to get me into the zone to be able to set aside every single thing I thought I knew. Because when I first went through the steps, what I thought I knew was going to kill me. I genuinely mean that. It talks about it on page 64 that resentment is the number 1 offender. It kills more alcoholics than anything else. In my first 18 months of recovery, I had a resentment against someone and it was going to kill me, but I was clinging on to it because I thought I knew how to sort this out. But my sponsor kept telling me to show up. My sponsor kept telling me to be of service. My sponsor kept on telling me to turn the pages with other women and men, to give them the solution. And I dove straight into helping other people. And all the while this resentment was bubbling and bubbling and bubbling and bubbling and growing arms and legs to the extent where I could not breathe. It was taking over every single fibre of my being. I'm being really honest on this talk tonight, and I don't know why. It doesn't really matter why, but I think I have to bring to life the extent to which my mind and my thought process, my mind where my illness centers, can still take control of me. I didn't realize that in making the decision in step 3 to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him, I didn't know, genuinely didn't understand that I had to give up the life that I had to get the one that was waiting for me. Like, I didn't know what it was to let go. I didn't know what it was to surrender. In my life, to surrender was defeat. I think I've said this before many times, to hold up that little white flag and surrender. No, that's not what Mags does. No, Mags fights to the bitter end with all her power and might. And in my first 18 months of sobriety, I got sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. Without the alcohol, without the drugs. And I became dependent on sponsorship. I became dependent on meetings. I became dependent on the big book. I became dependent on the words, the definitions, and all of that. And that was during lockdown. I had nothing else to do to keep me busy. And thank God for it. But then when lockdown lifted, I didn't have the ability to go outside my front door because I became dependent on the third dimension of existence. I became dependent on the physical. I became dependent on human power again. And I was clinging on to the life rather than giving up what wasn't working for me again to get the life that was waiting for me. And what I've started to understand through recovery is that this constant surrender is the most beautiful thing. This constant letting go of all of the things that are objectionable is the most beautiful thing. I know they deep down in my heart, I know that these things don't serve me any purpose. But there's a security in knowing. There's a security in thinking that I know. There's a security that comes from being comfortable with my ego and where I think it's trying to keep me safe. When in actual fact, all it's doing is bringing me to a place of unhappiness, confusion, calamity, resentment. Never gives me an answer. Always causes confusion. Yet in the moment of asking for that willingness, because I had to pray, like it says in step 6, for the willingness. And I continued to pray and pray and pray and pray for the willingness in the first instance. Because that next sentence at the beginning of step 7, when ready, we say something like this. Ready means for immediate use. I wasn't ready. For immediate use, I wasn't ready. I was too afraid to let go of those things that were objectionable because I still thought they were serving me some purpose. Yet all the while inside I was dying. My pride, what I thought you thought of me, was going to kill me. living in a world of that third column, self-esteem. And because of that pride and because of that self-esteem, it was affecting every single one of my personal relationships. I couldn't walk outside my front door. I got to a level of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization that I never thought was possible in recovery. And it happened. But thank God I had what my sponsor had given to me to understand that I could go on to the bitter end, like it says on page 25, blotting out the consciousness of the intolerable situation that I found myself in. Without alcohol and drugs, that did not come back, and it won't come back. But what I have is this illness that centers in my mind. So I let it continue. I let the suffering, and I let the, sounds like a really dramatic word, doesn't it? The pain, the emotion, the feelings, all of the things that I said at the beginning that we cast to one side, that we cast out, I let it continue for a little bit more because that felt comfortable for a period of time. But then I had no other option. Like it says, back in step 1 on page 25, to accept the spiritual help. You see, the reality of it is if I don't keep moving forward in the steps, my experience has been that I always get brought back, even in my thinking, to step 1, where I have to remember that I'm powerless. Not just over the drugs and alcohol, but I'm powerless over everything. And that as a result of that, my life becomes unmanageable. But I have to keep moving forward. You know, this certain simple attitude that it talks about in the big book, this certain simple attitude, that's the direction of travel. Continuing all the way to have the spiritual awakening as the result of the steps. On the flyer for this meeting, it talks about, you know, defects to the divine. I didn't realize that in my life that I was introduced to the divine through various really, really ordinary and many, many, many extraordinary experiences. And that actually throughout my life, this divine influence was evident. It was there throughout it in what appeared to be a cluster of complete and utter disaster, which actually occurred over a really, really short period of time. And through that cluster of absolute disaster, it rerouted my life to end up at the point of divine inspiration. So you might be sitting here thinking, what the actual is going on in my life? Everything is falling down around me. There's disasters everywhere. My family are not around. I haven't got the job. I do have the job, but it's not working the way that I want it. I haven't got enough money in the bank. I never have had enough money in the bank. All of those external third dimensional things. You might feel as if everything's fallen down around you. But those little clusters that might feel like disasters now, 100% are rerouting you to somewhere else. And what I have to do, and what I have to do every day, is to give up the life that I have now to get the one that's waiting for me. I have to give up the life of wanting to control, needing control. I've got to give that up. I've got to let go. Surrender does not mean defeat anymore in my life. I understand what it means to surrender. It's to let go, like it says on page 59, with complete abandon. You know, I bear witness all the time to the cluster of disasters in people's lives. And I also bear witness to the rerouting, that beautiful map that brings us to a destination that we didn't even think could exist. That's the divine. Yet my head, my ego, whatever you want to call it, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, but I know that my ego is the size of this planet. It's the size of this universe, and it thinks it knows. That's when I'm in my head and I have been given the divine ability, the divine inspiration, whatever way you want to describe it, to drop right into the awareness of the presence of God that lives in me. I've been saying this over the last couple of weeks. Don't know where it's come from. Don't think I'm a little bit crazy, but I'm just a little carry case for God. I carry it everywhere. And I can feel it. I can feel you. You know, I can hear you. I can see you. Because something happens deep down within us that enables me to, like it says, humbly ask for these shortcomings, these defects to be removed. I recognize even over the last lot of weeks and months, I do not have the ability to humble myself. I need more power. I need more God poured into me in order for those defects to continue to be removed. Now, my sponsor has taught me I am a perfect child of God, the God of my own understanding. I am, you know, it's like Mary Poppins, practically perfect in every way. That's what I am. That's what you are. That's what you are. But my ego would have me think differently, and it recreates itself every second of the day. So that's why I've got to keep on setting aside every single thing I think I know to have the new experience with God. Because if I'm in my egoic thoughts, I'm in my head, I'm not in my heart. If I'm in my egoic thoughts, I'm in fear, not in love. God is love. Fear is the opposite of God. It might all sound very confusing, but this will all be broken down for you. When I'm in fear, I'm separated from the power. When I'm in love, I'm so closely connected to this power that is within me. It's a very, very beautiful thing. And when we talk about being ready for immediate use, I want to tell you this now. Get ready. Get ready. Because when you say that 7-step prayer, all sorts of remarkable things happen. Like when we say our 3rd step prayer, all sorts of remarkable things happen. My step 7 experience honestly has been so transformative because, like I said at the top, I will cling on to the bitter end. I'm that type of person that really has to make my own pain and discomfort before I'll let go of anything. My experience in 6 and 7 with clinging on to my defects of characters was as tough as giving up the alcohol and drugs. The depth of the surrender that I had to go to then was the same as my defects of character, because I thought I knew. And when we're asking here and praying for God to take all of me, good and bad, all of me. My sponsor didn't give me a list of good and bad. My sponsor didn't give me a list of, assets and liabilities. My sponsor just said, it's over to God. I don't know what my defects of character are. I don't know what your defects of character are. My sponsees will phone and say, I think that's my people pleasing. I think that's my jealousy. I think that's my envy. So what do I do about it? I don't know. Because I don't know whether that is what is your defective character. I don't know. It's not for me to work it out. It's me, as a sponsor, it's up to me to direct individuals to the power. Ask God. And that word now is here as well. Now remove every single defect of character. The language is so precise. Every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and all my fellows. Because this is where the rubber starts to meet the road. This is where the work begins. Grant me strength so that I can go out to do your bidding, God. I'm going out into my step 8 and 9 here. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where I'm being placed to be of maximum service to God and those about me. Are we prepared to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol? It changes too. Are we prepared to go to any lengths for a spiritual experience? It changes. Because we have changed. Because once we're ready for God to remove all of these things, guess what? Be ready, He takes them. And then all of a sudden, you're going through your day and you're reacting differently to people, and you're saying inside your own mind, oh my God, what's happened there? It feels odd the way that you're behaving. There was times that I didn't recognize myself. I was reacting differently to life. I was reacting differently to people. I was keeping this big mouth of mine shut when normally I would have it open, giving you my opinion, giving you my judgment on what I think you should do. No, I always had to know the answer. That defect was removed. I was given the ability to say, I don't know. I was able to have the humility through the grace of God to say, I don't know. From the person that knew everything all of the time, the freedom to be able to say, I don't know. God, it's priceless. And it sounds so ridiculous probably, but my need to know was going to kill me. What were you doing? Why were you doing it? Why were you there? Why weren't you with me? You know, this defect of character that I had as well, I call it this complete and utter loss in continuity in my thinking. Warped, really. I was talking to my friend Laura about this the other day. I want you to love me, but I won't let you near me. That's a complete loss in continuity of my thinking. I so desperately want you to love me and I want to be loved, but I do not want you near me and I do not want you to know anything about me. That is the fault. That is the lack of power. In order for me to get close to you, in order for me to be comfortable with you knowing me and getting to know me and to get close to me, I needed more God. And little by little, ever so gently, God filled that gap. God filled that gap. You know, like it says in the doctor's opinion, and now we remain to pray, because that's all I do now. I want more God. Pour more God into me, because the reality of it is I don't need you now to love me. Because I've got so much love for myself that I never had before. But all I ever cried out for in my defect and my lack of was to fill it with something else. I don't need to be filled by third dimensional things. I live in the world of the spirit. This fourth dimension of existence enables me to have peace and love and comfort and compassion and fun and laughter. I was never capable of that. Genuinely, I was never capable of that. This is really funny and it's so fickle as well at the same time, but this is the extent to which things change. I've got a friend in the States and anyway, was out with some friends and somebody took a photograph and I sent him the photograph And when we were talking on the phone that night, he came back to me and he said, Max, have you had your teeth done? I said, no, I haven't had anything done. Seriously, have you had your teeth done? Like, going to some European country and getting new teeth in. I said, no, I have not. He said, you have to have had something done. I said, no, I haven't. I genuinely haven't. And he said, well, I know what it is. I said, oh God, here we go. What is it? He said, you just smile more. It sounds so stupid, but he had actually not seen me smile. That might not be seen like a big deal to anybody. I was never able to smile outwardly, really, because I was never happy within. And now all I do is smile. These big gnashers, you can see them all the time now. They're like big piano keys. Actually, it might be like more like a horse. But if somebody else had said that to me, I would have boxed your lights in, really. No violence, no violence. And I know that sounds really stupid, but the extent of my defective character, I wouldn't let you in. Not a bit of wonder I had problems with personal relationships, To be able to be given the strength to go out and do God's bidding. To be able to connect with the world. To be able to look the world in the eye and be alone at perfect peace and ease. To not actually need anybody in my life. I don't need anything. I don't necessarily want anything either. Because I keep surrendering and I keep letting go and I keep giving up the life that I have to get the life that's waiting for me. And it's not that I'm being greedy and there's something else better. It's not that. There's just more and more and more every single day being revealed. The beauty of this life of freedom from the bondage of myself. That's what's waiting for me. More of that. Much more than that. I was an uptight, horrible, individual, wanted revenge all the time. I was the judge, the jury, the executioner. God, that's been lifted. The defect, it's been lifted. And the easy thing about all of this is that the undoing of these defects of character, it's not my task. It's not my job to do. I don't actually have to work anything out, but it is 100% up to me to welcome it or not. The faith and the desire to change go hand in hand with each other. I have to have faith in the process and a desire to keep showing up, a desire to keep on turning the pages, a desire to let this God in, a willingness. That's what this is all about. But I don't actually do it. I just have to be present to experience my own existence, which I was never able to do before. To be present right here, right now, with every single one of you tonight, at this time of night, to be present and to feel the absolute love. Like every single one of you human beings on this screen, I adore. I don't care who you are and what you think of me, really. I just adore every single person that's making an effort for their own recovery and trying to give it away. Like, why are you guys here sitting at 11 o'clock listening to some crazy Irish woman? Why? Because you want to change your life. There's a desire. There's a willingness. You have faith in something. You might not have a faith in a God, but that doesn't matter. You've got faith in something. I've jumped all over the place. I don't know whether I've done a good job or not. It doesn't really matter whether I've done a good job or not. But here's the thing, and I'll finish on this one. It's all waiting for you. And whilst you think you're doing all of the work, you're not really You're not waiting. God's still working. Whether you know it or not. Just keep on setting aside every single thing you think you know to have this experience. And you hear me say this all the time, Tommy. You hear me say this all the time. You're all sitting in a prayer that you once asked for. And let me tell you now, if you don't believe that, you're sitting in the prayer that I'm asking for you, that you receive full-blown recovery, that you receive the grace of God in every single thing that you do, and that you hang out with a gang of people like this who are so into recovery and unity, and they change people's lives every single day. These guys have changed my life. They've changed my recovery, and I am forever grateful. So thank you.
Thank you, Mags. Thank you so much. Thank you for your share, you were heard. I appreciate you and grateful for you. Let's all just take a moment. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defected character, which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding.
Amen. I'd like to now hand back to Mags to take us out with a prayer or reading of your choice.
Thank you so much for your service, guys. I've picked a reading, guesswork, from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm just going to share this with you. Before I came on to the meeting this evening, I was told that a very, very dear friend of mine in the other fellowship that I'm part of, a home group member, was found dead because she could not and would not get this way of life. And I was with a sponsee and we were just reading this part of the book, and I think it is related just to what Katie has read out there, because this is why we do this stuff. We stand on the firing line. That's what keeps us well. It's page 130. Those of us who have spent much time in the world of spiritual make-believe have eventually seen the childishness of it. This dream world has been replaced by a great sense of purpose, accompanied by a growing consciousness of the power of God in our lives. We have come to believe He would like us to keep our heads in the clouds with Him, but that our feet ought to be firmly planted on earth. That is where our fellow travellers are, and that is where our work must be done. These are the realities for us. We have found nothing incompatible between a powerful spiritual experience and a life of sane and happy usefulness.